Hello and welcome back to LudoNarraCon. My name's Colin Campbell. I'm the author of a daily newsletter called How Games Are Changing the World. I'm joined for this afternoon's Fireside chat by Ziba Scott, who's a co-founder of Popcannibal. Ziba, welcome. I'll be looking forward to talking about narrative in games and all that stuff.
Oh, thank you, Colin. It's really nice to be here, cozy by the fire with you.
So you guys wrote the game Kind Words, which is an extraordinary game in which players they share letters to each other and they share their feelings and they give each other advice, they offer advice. And I know that I read Polygon's review of it and they were wild about this game. They absolutely loved that feeling of vulnerability that your game gave people. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But Popcannibal actually has a new game, which I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about that because it's tied in to LudoNarraCon. Tell us about Serrano.
Yeah, so well, LudoNarraCon came to us uh, uh, winter recently, and with this idea of like, we're looking for something. We've got about 2 months to make something. Would you be interested in playing along with this? And that sort of blank check of like, it's a tiny bit of time, but can you fill it with something? Just immediately, I don't know. I thought yes, and I need to go somewhere that I sort of already love and I'm already invested in, and that was the play Cyrano de Bergerac, which I've just had this thing for years. I've really loved it, and so we've spent, and right now, today actually, I think I just pushed a build to Steam that may be the one. So it's been a fast 2 months, and to produce this thing that I don't know. I'm really excited about. I'm a little dizzy and drunk off just having done the making of it.
Yeah, I mean, I played a build of it this morning and I had a lot of fun. It's as you say, it's the story of this famous French 17th century character from a 19th century play, Cyrano de Bergerac, who has a great talent with words, a great wit. He's a poet, he's a soldier, but he has this enormous nose, and he's very sort of self-conscious about his nose. But he's also best friends with a fellow soldier who is in love with a young woman, but he's unable. He trips over his words, and so Cyrano de Bergerac kind of helps him out by sort of pretending to be his voice in terms of, once again, sort of letters and poetry and words. So you went back to that kind of well. Is that something that you wanted to do to sort of explore words again and poetry?
Yeah, well, first off, I appreciate how like you gave me an opening to pitch the game, and I was just like, "Hey, LudoNarraCon said I can make a game," and then you were like, "Okay, I'm going to do a nice pitch of the game anyway." So thank you for that very nice recap for the story. I haven't actually been doing any publicity tours for this, so you're hired. Um, but yeah, it's I love the characters in the story, and I love them for their flaws, and that was something that I really wanted to be able to put into the game. I mean, this game came from a lot of places. There's practical reasons I had to do something quick. I had to do something approachable. I had to do something that I thought was an established good story. Um, but there's something about these characters, and they're lovable, and they're like Cyrano is the smartest, the strongest, the boldest, the bravest. He's also a jerk. He's also not someone you'd want to emulate. He's not someone who's successful in a lot of the endeavors. He's successful in so many things. He's a terrible failure in a lot of his personal life. I think you see that echoed in a lot of current popular cultural characters. You have Dr. House MD, this brilliant jerk who everybody knows he's the best, and yet you wouldn't want to be him. Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty. He's not a role model. He's the smartest, most capable person in the room, but he's miserable. And Cyrano is written in 1798, so he predates those by a bit, but he sort of fits this archetype of this character. You love them for their abilities and you root for them, but also you don't really think you'd want to have them as a close personal friend because they're just sort of they're trouble. And I just love getting into drama that has those kind of characters.
He's a character, is he? He's a bit of a blowhard. But he's got a sensitive soul. He's quick to temper, but he's also a bit thin-skinned about his appearance, and that's not something that you would see from your classic sort of early middle-aged male warrior character in video games. Is that what attracted you to him?
Yeah, it's not just him. He's got this cast of characters that will play. It's got this his best friend Lebret. who is sort of like an everyman who's almost a bit of Cyrano's hype man, and that's that I would almost Libret is more closely related to, I don't know, the average viewer of the game, and the participant who their flaw may not be seeing the flaws in their friend, and enabling them to be this jerk and just sort of cheerleading them on. And then there's Christian, this character who is not nearly as dumb as he thinks he is, and sabotages his own happiness by being reliant on the intelligence of Cyrano. And there's Roxanne, who's I'll probably admit, a bit of an underwritten female character in this, but she's there's a bit of this sort of Romeo and Juliet effect, where like Romeo and Juliet has gone down in history as like this great romance, but it's really just a couple of kids who saw each other twice, and a whole lot of people ended up dead because of their immediate infatuation. And so I don't know, it's a story that just rides this balance between like the best things in humanity, our greatest aspirations, and how easily and we muck them up by thinking we're just doing the greatest, most honorable things, when really take a step back and be like, maybe our love is not real, or maybe I should be more honest about something. It would be less grand than going and fighting 20 men to prove my love, but maybe I should just have a few words. I don't know. To me, it's a good slice of humanity's own, what we trip ourselves up over with. And I love that.
Talking of Roxanne, did you struggle with her a bit, because she's kind of a very Victorian sort of love interest, quite traditional, and as a female character, as a woman, did you find her difficult to sort of make contemporary, or did you just not even try?
So we tried to use absolutely as much of the original text of this play. I really wanted this to be like a production of the original English translation, which is one I'm familiar with. So 1923, Brian Hooker writes a brilliant English translation of the French play, and it's a big success in America and in English-speaking countries. I wanted this game to be like a production of a play, which is something I've always thought about. Like, in my mind, as I'm making games, it feels a lot like making a play. I'm making sets, I'm casting characters, I'm moving them around, I'm giving them their lines, their code. But when the time comes to go, they have to do it live, right? Games can always mess up and go off script and do weird things. And that's why, like, I see making a game is far more like producing a play than a movie or some other medium. You're setting up the actors, putting them on someone else's computer, and hope they do their thing. So that was sort of like the mindset I had. And so back to your question about Roxanne, it was like I wanted to use as much of the original. I wanted to be faithful to the original. And of course, there's a lens through which I see it, which any director putting on a production, they'll have the emphasis on that. And I had to make edits for that, which means that I emphasized some parts of the story. I reorganized a bit of the ending of the play, which sort of carries across my personal view of the characters with others. But those are all normal artistic director decisions, I think.
One of the things that I'm interested in here is the business of words in video games, because art is abstract, but words are even more abstract. And video games, I think, are all about action and movement. And words don't really, if I'm reading a novel, I'm not like rushing to get to the next page. But if I'm playing a video game, I'm kind of maybe clicking a little bit faster than I would if I was reading off a page. And certainly if I was sitting in the audience to play. How do you sort of mitigate that sort of difficulty of merging gameplay with reading?
That's interesting. So, and it's going to be different for a lot of people. I guess I never thought about rushing to the next page, but I do sometimes. I'll find myself like in a particular section, I'll be reading at the top of a page, and I know that on this page somewhere, like a big moment's going to happen, and I'll have to put my hand on the bottom of the page to keep my eyeballs from leaping down to be like, what's the thing, right? Like, so, I guess my argument there is I think reading can be quite exciting, if I can be corny there.
But I suppose I agree. But I suppose we're often told that gamers don't like to read; they're very impatient.
Yeah.
Is that something you're just like I just don't care? I'm looking for people who don't fit that profile, or is it something that you kind of have to work with?
Like I do care and I don't. I mean, there's in particular as an indie who, particularly with this game, I'm in a fortunate spot that I know it has its audience is going to be out there soon. That I'm not going to have to fight that hard for anybody to see it, and that's the position. Say like, well, indies are so free they can do whatever they want. But the truth is, they often have a whole lot of commercial considerations to make, and in this case, I didn't really have a lot of commercial considerations. I could make the thing I wanted. So yeah, at this point, I normally I try to be very attuned to like, oh, the audience is want this or that. But this one, I was like, no, this is good art, and this is what I'm doing, and I'm doing it for the sake of making a good piece. So, do gamers not like to read? I don't know. What I do know is that humans like to read, and every human is a potential gamer. Gaming, the set of people who do and do not consider themselves gamer, that question and that personal identity is really messy, and there's a lot of ugly stuff wrapped in, like I'm a gamer, I'm not a gamer, which shuts out people. I as a game developer, I have to tell people, what do you, they say, what do you do? I make games, and I mean, a lot of people they'll apologize. They say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't play games, and sometimes they really don't, but very often they'll be like, I'll be like, well, do you have anything on your phone that you? They're like, oh yeah. I mean, like Candy Crush and stuff. You play games, like it's such a weird thing that we have to spend time on. And I'm not saying we don't have to spend time and it's meaningful, but like people go like, I'm a movie watcher. There's a little bit of I'm a book reader, but still people would say, oh, you wouldn't apologize. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I never watched. Very few people would apologize for not engaging in a media or something like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I love words, and it's interesting because the game that I probably play the most is Words with Friends with my wife, which we just always, and a couple of friends of mine, we always just have, and it's literally a game about words, which brings me on to your earlier game, which you're best known for, which is Kind Words. And tell us about this game and why you wanted to make something that's so different and extraordinary within the context of video games.
Why did I want to make something extraordinary? Who would want to? No,
Fair enough.
So that was actually that was a So I made both Cyrano and Kind Words, and the game before it, Make Sail, I made with Luigi Guadieri, an artist, and Clark Abood, a musician, and we just spent like 4 years making this physics-based sailing game, Make Sail. And I love it. It's still in early access because it is, the scope of it was so big, classic, overambitious problem. And there's still so much I want to do on it and will do on it. But after 4 years of that, I was drained. And that coincided with American politics and global politics taking a very visible dive for the worse, for xenophobic and for being insular. And Luigi and I were just sort of looking for a way to spend our time that let us both follow our passion and interest in making games, but also feel like we were participating in this global conversation about what does it mean to be good to people? What does it mean to be part of a community and to care for others? Because it just looked so much like there's just so much rhetoric that just was dismissing the validity of other people's struggles around the world, particularly surrounding immigration. And we wanted to make something that we had absolutely no expectation that people would really play it. We thought making a tiny art project just for ourselves, but we wanted to be able at the end of it to at least look back and say, well, what did you do during those terrible political times of 20, I wouldn't put out, it was 2019. What did you do? Well, this was my reaction, and I can at least be proud of my reaction. And we were just insanely fortunate that it caught on and people played it.
Tell us about how the game works for those who aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure. Oh, thanks.
Great. You're doing great.
And I haven't thrown to you much. I am interested in you and what you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's fine. Like, I think people are going to be interested in, the fact that the games that you're making, and I love what you just said about this was my contribution to the Trump years. I think that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I had one of those about 10 minutes ago, a little freeze, but yeah.
So shall I just go back to? I can't even remember what I said last. What was my last question? Oh yeah, that's right. So I asked you to just sort of talk about how the game works. Okay, I'll do that again. Yeah. So tell us about how the game actually works.
Kind Words is it's a letter writing game where you write what you're worried about, what's stressing you out, and you post that online anonymously. And you post it in this global inbox, and everybody else looks at these messages and goes through and finds one that they feel they can reply with words of sort of comfort or maybe advice if they're in a similar situation, and or at least just letting you know you're not alone in your worries. So you make these requests, you say, I'm stressed about this, and then a bunch of people reply to you, and then you can reply to these messages. But after someone replies to your message, that's it. It's done. This isn't a conversation. It's not a forum. It's not a thread. It's, I feel bad about this. And someone else says, I feel you. I understand. I've been through there too. And then you trade stickers, and that's it. That's the end of the whole interaction.
And how did it work in the real world? Did it function in the way that you'd anticipated?
The volume of communication was just immediately more than we thought. So we originally published it as a Humble original. Humble has it was called monthly then, Humble Choice now. And at the end of every month, they just sort of throw in one small game that they've contracted. And it's not the game. It doesn't have a Steam key. It's the little, I don't know. It's like the tiny little like parsley on your dish of monthly games. Not to insult any of the games. There's a lot of great ones, but it's just, so we just assumed like, all right, it's going out there. We did our thing. We're done with this. And then like, within hours of it coming out, we just had thousands of messages coming through the game, people talking to each other, posting their concerns. And it also got really dark really fast too. I mean, Kind Words is a place where we encourage people to be, we don't, it's a place for serious topics, and that also includes serious language. And so we really try absolutely as best as we can not to censor language and topics as long as they are in pursuit of requesting or giving comfort. And so there's a lot of suicidal ideation. There's talks about abuse. There's talks about self-harm. There's talks about a whole lot of much lighter things, which are also very important to have in there. Like, I'm just plain bored today. I wish I weren't bored, or and it's a wild mix of humanity. When you open up Kind Words and look at the list of what's in there, this global inbox of what people are feeling, it is a beautiful, messy picture of people.
And people were kind. That's the general takeaway, right? People responded positively.
Yeah. So, I mean, just the overwhelming majority of the messages that go through there are really constructive, on point, heartfelt. We try and make a point in the game that you can't help everyone. You can't solve everybody's problems. But the minimum you can do is you can tell everybody that, yeah, I hear you. You're not alone. And, you're with us. And that's, I feel a little bad saying, to me at least, it was surprisingly meaningful to see that. There's so much. There are a lot of what you could often consider sort of platitudes that are just put to the game. Someone says, "I'm not feeling that close to my girlfriend today, and I don't know what to do about it." And then someone will just say, "It's always darkest before the dawn," or just some pat statement. But
right
in execution, hearing that means something. It comes from a real person. It comes with a real sentiment. And I just get all these feedback from people that just hearing the simplest things directly towards them, in support of them, from other humans is really meaningful.
So did you get feedback that people felt validated, that people felt comforted and helped through this game?
Yeah, we're I think one of the reasons I suspect that we get a lot of this feedback is a slightly dirty design trick of the game, is that in the game you can you request for help, then you receive help from someone else, and you can say thanks with a sticker, but you can't send them back words. So a lot of people, when they get excited about somebody, I had this moment of connection, somebody listened to my problem, or they had the same problem themselves, and all I could do is send them a sticker. And they'll message me all the time saying, I want to write back to people. And there's a lot of reasons we cut the conversation off. But I think that just leaves a lot of people hanging with this positive response to give out somewhere to someone in the world. And so I do just see, coming out of Kind Words, a lot of vocal, I had a great interaction here, someone really made my day there. And so I just hear it sort of popping outside of Kind Words, because they can't direct inside Kind Words where they want. They can direct it back to other players in Kind Words, pass it forward. But it's a weird design limitation that I think works in favor of the game's publicity.
And it's interesting that at the beginning of the game, it's introduced by this talking deer, and the deer notably says, "Hey, look, this is not a place for toxicity or meanness. There's enough of that on the internet." How did you ensure that people weren't horrible to each other? Because we've all faced it. We all know what the internet's like.
Yeah. Well, the structure of the way information flows in Kind Words is a lot more like a river, some flowing body of water, than like a message board like YouTube or something, because you put out these requests, and after these requests get responded to, they're done, they're gone, they're out of the system. And when someone replies, they reply only to you. There's just not a lot of interesting surface for trolls or disruptive text to hang around on. There's no upvoting, no likes, almost no quantitative anything in the game to give you scores or to promote things. And so there's no number one comment that was this wicked awesome comeback. It was mean, but it was hilarious, so it sticks around. It's just, there's no surface area for that to attach to Kind Words.
And because the game is not about engagement, the game is, as you say, is about these short, discrete, intimate moments, which don't. I suppose that's why you had that design trick, that you if they drag on, you sort of increase the potentiality for possibly for lifetime friendships, but also for horribleness. Is that right?
Yeah, right. I mean, the number one concern, the number one reason we don't have ongoing conversations is we don't have the capacity to moderate such things. And even if we could, that's not going to. My concern is predation. We've created a place where we're inviting people who are in vulnerable mental states to come and talk about their problems, and to have strangers talk back to them. And my number one worry is people meeting someone through Kind Words, taking that conversation, someone who comes to Kind Words to find people to take advantage of. And so that's a big reason we insist on anonymity, and not exchanging Discord handles or Steam IDs and stuff like that, and to keep these interactions from growing into personal relationships. It's a game about healing and connecting with humanity, where we very much do not want you to grow personal relationships.
Right. And it's interesting that the game is about writing letters, which is it's a skill previous generations found to be valuable, which we don't really use, even though we communicate so much more than they did with GIFs and emojis and we've got all these extra tools for communicating, and actually sitting down and writing a letter to somebody, and talking about our deepest anxieties is not something that people do very often. And I suppose this game, as well as getting the comfort from other players, you get the catharsis of actually just saying your piece. And I noticed that when Polygon wrote about it, the writer Patricia Hernandez, that was the point that she made, that she felt able to talk about something that she hadn't shared with even her closest friends.
Yeah, and this is not our first writing game, and there's something that's so compelling about writing. I keep kicking myself because it makes all our games hard to go to console, or impossible, or, it's just. But writing in a game gives such expression. It's this such a broad bandwidth of the ability to input yourself into a game, right? Everybody talks about how games where you can create, and your town building, you're constructing factories or whatnot, that you can put your own self in there and make decisions. That's what this modern age of gaming really does so well. And language is the most expressive thing that we can really put. You can put anything in there. And I think a lot of other devs may have shied away from it more than we did because it's really hard to give quantitative feedback on writing. Did you write a good letter? We made a game before this called Elegy for a Dead World about writing poetry, and people, really got into that. And our answer is, well, we're not going to judge. There's no point. People judge themselves so harshly when you engage in a task, especially if in Elegy and in Cyrano, actually, there's this element where we invite you to do creative writing. And it's this full bandwidth, expressive input to a game that just the act of having done it is engaging and unique enough that I find players don't need a score at the end of it. And I think that's why it's so, I don't know, that's the route that I found satisfying, to put writing in there. It fits. Maybe what I've made is not even quite a game anymore. Kind words may not be a game, but it's game-like and allows you to engage really deeply with it.
Yeah, and I agree that writing is an incredibly satisfying thing to do creatively. I mean, I write for a living, but I also write in my spare time, and I find it comforting to write fiction. And it's nice that to be able to give people that outlet. You look at a lot of the creative games that are out there, like Dreams, for example, which is a game we and I've talked about. That takes a certain amount of visual talent, which I do not have, and artistic talent. And yet, I think there are a lot of people who do have a creative talent with words but just don't have them with pictures. Do you think that's something that more game makers could maybe try to tap into?
And I certainly don't want to. There are a lot of game makers out there. You were just saying earlier, Words with Friends is one of your favorite games, right?
Right.
And it's different kind of wordplay. It's not creative writing, but it's still engaging this part of something that we've all trained in so hard. Such a complex and interesting, rich area. And I do think there are more angles where writing could be in place, especially as we're getting into these machine learning, GPT era stuff that can construe these coherent blurbs of text to play along with you, right? Like one of the struggles I've had in the writing games we make is the blank page problem. You give somebody a blank page, and it's overwhelming. Like in Cyrano, we invite you to write love letters, and if I just give you a blank sheet and said, "Go ahead, write a love letter, whatever you want," the effect, I think, because we had this in Elegy too. Go ahead, here's a blank page, write poetry. People will sit down. People, especially people who have this affinity for writing, or this they like the idea of it, even if they don't do it. They'll sit down and they'll be like, "Oh, it's a game. I'm good at games, and I've always wanted to be a writer. So I've never met a game I couldn't be good at, because games want you to be good at them, or complete some level. And this game's about writing. Therefore, the equation means I will be good at writing." And I've put some of these prototypes in front of people with a blank slate, and the response we get back is like, "Oh wow, yeah, this is a great game, and I see what you're trying to do, and it looks like executed really well. But I couldn't write anything. Therefore, I'm a bad writer. I'm a bad person, and I have failed at this game. But your game's great." And just trying to think like, no, my game's so bad it made you feel bad about yourself and blame someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. People say, "Oh, I can't write." I'm like, "Yes, you can. Everybody can write. Everybody can write." And it's interesting that, even AAA games I've been playing, like Ghost of Tsushima, it has a poetry mechanic going on in there with haiku. The new Assassin's Creed, they've got like rhyming couplets, where the character is given, is in combat with other players, and they're trying to outwit each other with words. And really, all you have
stole that right out of Cyrano.
They all you have to do is just to hear the beats of the poem, and that that's how the game is played. But it's interesting that these games, which are often called kind of bloated and over engineered, are experimenting with words and wordplay, and I think that's fantastic. I think it's a really good place. But what I did find interesting, what you just said, is this idea that in the future, you might be able to converse with AIs, and that will be a huge part of gaming, where you've got this AI friend who's not going to be sort of needy or self-indulgent, and who's there for you, who's there as your sort of foil or your friend. Is that seems like something that could be really massive, a way of like telling a story of your own life and your own relationship with this sort of person. What do you think about that as a future?
I mean, that's ambitious, and I do hope we get there. And I think we're even closer to a smaller level of just being sensibly reacted to a point that you feel you've been heard. It's just like, with kind words, people want to say their problems and be heard. If you feel like the character in the game, you articulated something to them and they actually seemed to understand it and react in a sensible way. I mean, just that, even if most of it's trickery, that's a huge leap, I think, into emotional connections with games, because we are already inclined we're inclined to relate to computers as we do to people. We'll yell at screens even though we know they can't hear us. We're still going to talk out loud to our malfunctioning computer anyways. And so we are just primed. That's the word. We are primed to, if I type something in a game to a character, I'm ready to have a real conversation. I'm ready to have it respond to me. And I will forgive a whole lot of weird quirkiness around it, because I'm just ready to jump into that theater of it's alive and it knows who I am.
Yeah, I feel the same way. If I play something like Civilization, I get frustrated when the AIs don't behave as sort of asshole dictators. I want them to behave in the way that, and when they behave like idiots, I get very, very cross with them. And even though it's all trickery, it's all pixels and screens, and I agree with you. I would 100% buy into an AI person who is speaking to me in a way that's believable and relatable. And I can't wait until we get closer to that within games.
Yeah, good idiots. That's something I want more of. Like you're frustrated with the games being an idiot, right? Like, but of course you want it to make mistakes because you want to best it, or you just want it to, for drama. And as I was saying before, that's one of the things I love about the characters in Cyrano. They have these very human flaws, and so I think that's a real AI forefront. To have this a frontier to have them make mistakes that make you feel clever. I guess it's sort of like, trying to lose a game to a small child and make them believe they won convincingly. Just like, all right, oh no, I moved my checker piece over here. Shouldn't have done that, should I? Like, to have a game be able to convince me that, like, oh, it wanted to do better, but it has these fatal flaws and it just can't see past this. And I understood that it has these issues with its mother, and I played it against that, and it made that mistake. And I don't know. That's exciting. We'll get there.
We will get there. But at the moment, I think that it's my view that games in the last 10 years, one of the major pieces of progress has been that they're better written, that the characters are better written, that they're more relatable. They're still not there in terms of being, I think, as relatable as characters in novels and films on the whole. Where are we going with the importance of writers in games?
It's a good question. We're going wider for one. Like, what game? What is the definition of what is a game and who is this game for? Right, it gets wider. Like, let's say you took an incredibly well, you take I don't know, you take someone who's a well-established writer, but not in a genre where games are well-established, and you go back 10, 20 years and have them write a game, and I think it's going to be confusing. It's not going to be appreciated for what it was. The audience for gaming wasn't ready for the NES era gaming, both sort of maybe the tech presentation, but probably even just more the audience wasn't ready for, I don't know, Danielle Steele or some, great sweaty romance novel. Right. And they very clearly are now. Like, we've arrived there. All right, we found that audience. And it's not just that necessarily the gaming audience appetite broadened. It's the number of people who are drawn to games. Like, all right, I see the genre I care about can now be expressed well, and not just technically, but we figured out ways and rhythms to introduce characters and map them to activities that resonate with me. And I think we're going to find easier ways to pair the talents of really established writers or people who are growing up in the shadows of those established writers, people who are pursuing, they're like, I want to be a great, noir novelist. They're going to see oh, games is a much more viable area for me now, and they're going to move into that in just all these more areas. I don't know. It's
Yeah, I
easier for
mean,
me to say wide than depth. There's going to be depth, but I couldn't tell you as not an expert writer. I don't know.
no, I think that you've got now platforms that are able to express, ideas, and people who've got ideas they want to express. And when you put those two things together, then you get more interesting games than the kind of genres that we saw 30 years ago, and that we're sort of iterating upon, but also moving on from slightly as well, as we get into genres that are based on people, are based on
Yeah.
engaging with people and feeling their emotions and then feeling your emotions. And I think that is an area where everybody's interested in other people, everybody's interested in
Yeah.
themselves and that interaction. And I think
Do
that's
Do you
where
have an
where
idea
we're
of
going.
what's gonna pop up next? I mean, we've gotten our clearly romance, at least a certain type of romance is hit. Do you know? Do you have an inkling of what's coming around the corner here?
I don't. I've never been good at predicting the future, but I will say this: is that I've been playing a lot of Crusader Kings 3, and the thing about that game that I'm not interested in particularly is like sending my armies out and making sure they've got enough food and all that. What I'm interested in is romancing other characters, manipulating other characters, being kind of an asshole when I need to be in order to get what I want as a sort of medieval
Yeah.
ruler, and it allows me. What I like about the game is that it allows me to be a leader with all that comes with it. And I wrote about this recently in that I'm kind of a loner, and I'm sitting in my office here, and I don't have any bosses, and I don't have any reports. But in that game, I get to be a boss. I get to be in charge of dukes and earls and armies. And in order to be good at that, it's not just about math. It's about language, and it's about
Yeah.
saying the right thing and making people feel a certain way. And it's pretty simplistic at the moment. We're still not there. It's basically dialogue trees. But
Yeah.
the trickery, as you say, is more sophisticated in that the game can,
Yeah.
in moments, make me feel as if I'm dealing with a real person, and make me feel sort of jealous or
Yeah.
angry with somebody, and make me feel satisfaction about putting them in a dungeon for 20 years, and which is not something I would do in real life. But it gives me a
Yeah.
catharsis or whatever, and I think that's what games are going to be really good at in the future, which they're not that good at now, which is making you feel like a different human being,
Yeah.
like making you be. Today I feel like being a beautiful young woman. Well, why not? Why shouldn't I feel like
Yeah.
being that person? And I think that's where we're going.
Yeah.
So I guess anything else you want to talk about as we kind of wrap this up?
Um, Maybe I'll just give some general optimism for for the state of games. I mean, I think it's I know I'm never going to run out of corners to explore in terms of like how can we try out something that's going to make somebody think, feel, or engage differently with games as a medium than they did with my last game. Like there's as far as I can see, just this endless. Um, they can be it can be hard sometimes, but so many new variables keep coming into games from so many different angles. Just AI or different ways of getting funding or different platforms to build on or data sets, global satellite imagery and all sorts of stuff that just they come in and they have this multiplier of like now you have global right. You've got satellite imagery. We can make that into a flight sim. We could make that into a detective game. We can make that into a real estate game. And like every new large weird tech that comes in, we're going to have better AI speakers. We're going to have AI voice synthesis. We're getting phones that can do good facial mocap, raising the bar for if you want to make, so it's, it's, um, it's going to get wilder and wilder. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing about games since the 1980s, and the golden age is now, and it always seems to get more interesting as there are just more ways to make games, to distribute games, to talk about games, and also the ways that games connect with other areas of life, education, health, and those sorts of areas. And I think that's so fascinating and so interesting.
Yeah.
It's
Wait,
been
one thing I
great
want
to
to
get.
add on this. So one thing is great. Sorry, I just want to make sure, but a lot of this is important. I am excited about more people of more different backgrounds coming in and making games too. I think that's a big thing for now. The ease of access of people becoming a part of a game making community and bringing with them their own stories and experiences. That's broadening, and that is fantastic too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so if anybody wants to go look at your games, where should they go? On Steam?
Yeah, Steam. Look up Popcannibal. I mean, right now you should be looking at LudoNarraCon and seeing the Cyrano, the beautiful pictures that Luigi made, and maybe even the music Clark is. If I'm going to demand editor right now. Oh, we're not supposed to do this. Editor, play some Cyrano music over the lead out here.
Well, look, Ziba, thanks very much. I'm looking so much forward to seeing what you come up with next. It's been great talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.